Hey,
Hey,
thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview.
my pleasure.
And yes, and stepping into Monique's lounge, where you're actually going to offer some of your experiences,
Hmm.
just, some of the things that you've been through in regards to mental health and losing someone.
Hmm.
Because as you know, here we help people by our experiences. We also help them to manage their mental health, and also to destigmatize it. And what we believe is, the more you talk about it, um, the easy things get for people, right? We always walk around, we're all pent up and so much inside of us, and we can't free ourselves out of fear.
Right.
So this is partially why I decided to do this, because I want this to be an environment where people feel comfortable, to relief and also help others.
Hmm.
So again, thank you very much.
Thanks for
Um,
having me.
you're welcome. So I wanted to start by having you introduce yourself.
Okay, so my name is Katrina Drummond. I am 49 years old and I am a widow, actually.
Okay.
I work in corporate America. I've been in the HR function for about 20 years now, I think it's been. And part of my role, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I was excited when you asked me to do this, also, aside from my own personal tragedies and overcoming grief and stuff like that. Mental health at work is so super important to me because it needs to be more normalized, right? And especially in the Black community or people of color. Like, I come from an era where if someone said they had mental health issues, they were deemed crazy.
Mm-hmm.
um, because I think that we didn't understand it. We didn't understand that, those negative feelings that we may encounter are a result of a tragic um, event that may have occurred in our lives. And we just didn't know how to deal with it because either our parents, they themselves didn't know how to tell us to deal with it, and their parents didn't know how to tell them to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I'm probably jumping, so I apologize, but
No, that's
um,
okay.
once I started to go through my own grief process and um, understand that it is mental health that I'm dealing with, I realized that it runs in my family on both sides. So again, that is why it's important to normalize it.
Right, generational.
Hmm.
Okay. Can you tell us a little a little bit why this topic actually resonated with you?
Yes.
And
So
by the way, let me
mhm.
cut you off real quick because I might need you to come back into the lounge and have a discussion about mental health in the workplace,
Oh, absolutely.
because
Anytime.
that's another topic that we do talk about. So I think you would be great for sharing information about that as well.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I can definitely share information, resources, you name it.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
So you said a
So
little
the
bit. Mhm.
topic, why did it resonate with you?
So the topic on grief resonated with me because, like I said at the start of the interview, I am myself a widow. I'm a young widow at that. I lost my husband 8 years ago after a long battle with illness attributed to diabetes. Um, it was really, really hard. And I myself had to go through therapy. I'm still in therapy. And one of the things that I learned going through that process is that I have never sat in my grief. I thought I did, but I didn't. Um, if I could take a step back, as a kid, like most kids, I've always been afraid of death. Like, oh my God, I don't want to die. Like, what's going to happen if I die? Like, that kind of stuff. Um, but I found once I got into my 20s, it just became a norm to me. It was always around me in some way, shape, or form. I lost my best friend at a very, very young age. And that was traumatic as well because I had to continue through this journey in life without her.
Who's your
And
best friend? Who was your best friend?
your sister.
That's
Her
right.
name was Joanne Fowler
I was
Smith.
getting ready to say, let's say her name.
Absolutely. But we were friends. It was really hard for me because we had, and I'm not going into all that, but we had a little separation within our relationship um, for a couple years, but we were on the mend. And what was so traumatic for me, aside from losing her so young, was like I said, going through this journey called life without her. Like we did all of our first pretty much together, everything like
Mm,
young teenagers would do. Um, but I had to go through so much and I had people that were close to me, but I've never had that same type of relationship, right? Like we knew each other, we knew what you were going to think, how you was going to react, whatever. So I felt like she was taken before we could fully mend everything. So you
mm,
have those type of regrets because I blame both of us for allowing other people to keep that wedge. And now I can't fix that anymore, right? So that took a toll on me. But luckily, I had my husband there um, who knew how close we were because me and her married two brothers. So,
mhm.
which was really funny because growing up, we used to pretend we were sisters at one point. We pretended we were cousins. And we had said, wouldn't it be cool if we married brothers? And we end up marrying brothers. And if I would have had children, our children would have been cousins, right?
Right.
But whether whether we had gotten but whether we had married brothers or not, she was always going to be my sister and my family, so it didn't matter to me, but I digress. So after Joanne
Okay.
passed away, I took that really hard, and my husband, he had to deal with it not just from me but also from his brother, both of us, coming at him at the same time with our grief or whatever, but he was so super supportive. When I met him, I knew he was, he had been battling diabetes, but it wasn't at the magnitude that he, involved into, right? So watching that was a traumatic experience. And I didn't realize until almost near his death that I was actually grieving him while he was still alive because I knew it was coming and I kept without people
Mm,
like doctors or anyone telling me like, oh, he's terminal or whatever. I just the connection you feel something is about to happen.
mm,
And he died before my eyes. Um I was getting him ready for dialysis one morning. It was a Monday morning. And he said he couldn't breathe and he didn't really want to go to dialysis and could I give him his nebulizer. So I did. And it didn't work. He had to go to the bathroom. I led him to the bathroom because at that stage he couldn't walk by himself. He couldn't do much of anything by himself. So I was his caretaker. I was living
mm,
two lives, right? So he ended up having a heart attack in the bathroom, and I had to watch the first responders work on him
mm,
right outside of my bedroom because our bathroom was right next to the bedroom. So they laid him on the floor in front of our bedroom, and I had to watch that whole thing
mm.
until finally it felt like, and I don't think anybody can understand what I mean when I say this, but that was the first time in my life that I ever felt God's presence so strong. Um, it was almost like God said, "Have a seat, my child. I got it." Because I just calmly sat down on the side of the bed
Mm.
and I looked out the window and it was like, I'm not in control anymore. So after he passed away, I'm like, what am I going to do now? He's all I know. Like, I've been with him since I was 19 years old. I was now
Mm.
41. What am I going to do?
Oh man,
Um,
yeah.
so losing him, and what a lot of people don't realize with grief, some emotions that we may struggle with from a mental health perspective, we kind of suppress it. If we get that right person in our life, we will suppress those feelings. I've always struggled with my weight. I've always struggled with body image issues, right? But when I was with my husband, it wasn't on the forefront of my mind. Like I knew, I was a big girl, but it wasn't like, oh my God, I have to be like this all the time, right? Because first of all, he wasn't having it, but second of all, he always made me feel beautiful. He never like pointed out my flaws in a negative way. He would encourage me, like, man, you're beautiful. I love you. I love every little curve, every little whatever. And a
Mm.
lot of women don't get that.
Yeah.
Um, but the minute that he died, it was like that little girl, that 16-year-old girl who first started dealing with those image issues, she came alive again. And
Mm.
at 49, I'm still dealing with it. I am still dealing with it. What I'm trying to convince myself with that is this is me. Like either you like it or you don't. Like
Mhm.
I'm not gonna kill myself trying to appease the world. So,
Of
but
course not.
as far as the grief process goes, it's like, what do you do now? Then you start questioning your own mortality, especially
Mhm.
given I lost my best friend very young. She was 35. Then I lose my husband. He's 45, 46 when he died. Um, and here I am, 41. Am I next? And in my
Mhm.
head, especially with Joanne passing, it was like, we did all our first together. So am I gonna die too? So it was so super scary for me for a long, long. But with my husband, I didn't know what to do, and I pretended like I was good, I was strong, I can't break down, like I got this,
Mhm.
but I really wasn't. I wasn't,
Mhm.
and as a result of internalizing all of that stuff, um, I developed. I had already had depression, but I never spoke about it. But I developed um, anxiety really bad. I was afraid to be alone. I was afraid any little pain, like I have asthma, but anything, I was like, this is it. I'm going to die. I'm going to have a heart attack.
Mhm.
I'm going to have this. This is going to happen. And then I would make it even worse. I don't know how
Yeah.
many times I've been to the hospital from anxiety for freaking out for no reason. And once I get there, there's nothing wrong. My numbers are normal. So it, 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 it's been really tough. And then following my husband's death, I lost my grandmother. I mean, I've lost other family members in between, but I'm touching on the people who are closest to me, right?
Mhm.
So my grandmother has been a important person in my life for as long as I can remember. As a child, I was always at my nana's house, and you know that.
Mhm.
Um, but as my grandmother began to age, I made sure I was there for her because when people start to get old, they feel like they're not needed anymore.
Mhm.
And I never wanted my grandmother to feel like, her opinion didn't count. Like
Mhm.
it always counted, like she might be a little old school with it, but she didn't have to know that I wasn't going to follow exactly what she said. But I gave her that platform or that
Mhm.
forum to give me that advice and that guidance, and it made her feel good. Um, the sad part is my grandmother got sick. Well, when 2020 rolled in, I don't know why, I woke up one morning and I said, oh God, this is the year.
Mm.
I said, I'm not going to have my grandmother through this year. Now, nothing was really wrong with her other than normal aging, whatever. I called my cousin, who's like my sister, Tashawn, and I said, I got to tell you something. And she said, well, I said, we're not going to have Nana through the end of this year. She's like, why would you say that? I was like, we not. I feel it. And I didn't speak on it no more. By August, my grandmother's health started to decline. October 1st, I developed COVID. I caught COVID and I was hospitalized. But by that point, my grandmother, her mom was completely gone. Um, my I think right after I came out of the hospital for the second time, because I was hospitalized twice. When I came out the second time, it was like it was nearing her end. I didn't even get to go in person and say goodbye to my grandmother because
Mm.
I didn't if she would have survived, I didn't want to risk the chance of giving her COVID because it was still kind of in my system. Um, so I never got to say goodbye. And when that phone call came that morning, I lost my mind. Lost it. I didn't want to talk to nobody. Nobody could console me that day because I talked to my grandmother pretty much day, every day. And she would say the same stuff over and over again. Like she would tell me about the weather. She would talk about what was going on in the world, her medication, and how many bathroom movements she had. That was the gist of our conversation. But it made her feel good because I let her talk. I didn't judge her.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything. So now I don't have that anymore. So now my depression is even worse, right? I lost my nana. That was November of 2020. March 8th of 2021, I get a phone call. Sorry, March 9th, 2021. I get a phone call from my father's home attendant. He's not answering the door. Now, I had just spoke to my dad the night before. He was fine, but I knew he had been drinking. And
Yeah.
my father was an alcoholic and he was also very sick. He had hypertension really, really bad. And I used to tell him, like, you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do any of that. Like, I fought with him like I was his mother. And for the most part, in the last year of his life, he listened to me because he was hospitalized. Um, but that night, March 8th, when I heard the slurring in his voice,
Mm.
it was a trigger for me because whenever my father would get that inebriated, he would become a different person. He wouldn't hit us, but he would talk to us very derogatory. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And I was like, I'm not tolerating any man talking to me like that, crazy. I don't care if you are my father. Like, you're not gonna talk to me crazy like that. So I said, Daddy, I told you I'm not speaking to you in this, like when you're like this. So I'm going to bid you adieu and I'm hanging up. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And he's all like, and I hung up. Never spoke to my father again because he was gone that morning. When
Mm.
the home attendant called, then I said, it was weird. It was like I knew what had happened, but I didn't want to accept it. And I just said to her, I was like, all right, keep me posted. Now I could hear her banging, banging, banging on my dad's door, but my mind just said, keep me posted. Let me know, if he answers the door. And I hung up and I started working again. And then something said, dummy, what do you mean keep you posted? So I called back and I was like, he still hasn't answered. And she's like, no. And I'm like, all right, I'm calling 911. So when I called the cops, long story short, I told them, go through the neighbor's house to get in there, whatever. And as I'm driving to the Bronx, it hit me. I said, my father's gone. I said, because they got in, but nobody called me to tell me he was sleeping or anything. It went
Mm.
radio silent. And every time I kept trying to call back, the home attendant wouldn't answer, which was a dead giveaway, right? So when I got there, I put the key in the door and the cops ran to the door and they're like, I was like, he's gone, right? And the cop was like, I'm so, so sorry. And I asked to see my father. And I went in his bedroom and he was sitting slumped on the floor in a sitting position underneath the window. And he was already cold, he was hard, he was gray, it was traumatic for me because like every other little girl, regardless of how close you are with your father is always going to be a giant to you. And it was like the giant had fallen.
Mm.
And then it hit me, it was like, oh God, I'm never going to hear my father's voice again. And that is something that I tell people with grief. It's like, I don't think it's entirely their presence being gone, it's the silence of their voice that,
Mm.
for me, that is so hard. Like, especially when it's somebody that was like the life of the party. Like, Tookie. Tookie come in, the whole room is like, everybody knew he was there. So not to hear that voice, not to see that energy anymore, it was
Mhm.
hard. Joanne. Joanne was shy, but her smile lit up any room she was in. I don't care what the situation is. She smiled, you smiled, right? My nana. My nana was a firecracker. Like, she would be funny, but at the same token, she was no nonsense. And my father, when he wasn't drinking, he was a comedian. Like, you would be in stitches. Me and my sister still right now, we sit back and we think back to the last year of my dad's life that we was there for him, and we reminisce on some of the funny things that went on as we were caring for him or whatever. But that is one of the hardest things, is the silencing of the voice.
Right. Let's
I
take a
know that was a
minute.
lot.
Well, you said a lot, right? And so I just want us to just take a couple of breaths because it's very overwhelming.
It is. Every time I think about it, I
Yeah.
try. But
Well, let's just take a couple of breaths.
I'm
Tell me
okay.
when you're ready. You ready?
Hmm.
Okay.
I'm okay.
Um, so I mean, like I said, you said a lot, right? Actually seeing your husband pass right before your eyes, not being able to say goodbye to your dad, not being able to say goodbye to your grandmother, and with my sister, your best friend, um, having that space that came between y'all, um, appeared to have done something to you. But the good thing about it is you guys did were on the path to renew
We
and
did.
try to make it as strong as possible. But then she ended up passing. So I mean, yeah, it's definitely a lot that you've been dealt with. Um, so tell me, how have you gotten through? I know you said you go to therapy now. Um, you also mentioned that you didn't even know you were grieving, right?
I did.
So when did you realize? So let me ask that question first. When did you realize you started grieving about everything? Was it
Um,
after Tukey passed? Was it after like when?
it was after Tookie passed.
Okay.
Because I felt lost. So after he passed, I was like, what am I going to do? Because that's another thing. And I tell people, when you're a caregiver to somebody, that becomes your norm. So you
Yes.
don't know anything else but to care for
Yes.
that person. So when I did, when he died or whatever, it was like, what do I do now? I was working full time, but I was so used to juggling work and then caring for my husband. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to school. I'm gonna go
Mhm.
do my degree. I enrolled in Mega Everest College in Brooklyn, and that didn't work out. I felt like
Okay.
I was in high school again. Like, they weren't, the other students weren't serious. And I'm like, I'm too old for this. Like, I'm not doing this. So I dropped out. Then I'm like, okay, now what?
Now
I'm
what?
still lonely. What am I doing? Um, so then I said, oh, well, I always wanted to focus on losing weight or whatever. I said, I'm going to go to a gym and like work this energy off. So I did. I went to a gym. I hired a trainer. I ended up losing like 50 pounds,
Mm.
um, which also put me on the path to, I wrote 2 books. That's like a bad plug, but I did. I wrote 2 ebooks. They're not full books. They're Kindle books, but it was therapeutic because initially the first book was supposed to be like a memoir of what I had just experienced with losing my husband. But being the creative Piscean that I am, I went into a whole like fictional story, but I pulled from pieces of my life and from other people's
Mhm.
lives. So those who have read the book love the book. It's like, you got to write another one. And I
What's
was
the
hyped.
title?
Temptress.
Interest.
Temptress
Okay.
is the first book, and the second book is Temptress: Two Dangerous Lies.
Okay.
Um, so I wrote those two books, and the second book, honestly, I wrote it because of everybody else. I didn't feel like I was ready to write the second book yet, but it was like so much pressure because of the first book that I hurried up and started writing the second book. So that's why it's taken me longer to write my third book, which is going to be totally different. But
Right.
um, the third book, because I want to take my time and I want it to be a full book. But that's what I did. I tried to find things to keep me busy. One of the worst things that I did was shop. I shopped. I was in the mall every day, just so that I didn't have to be home
Okay.
because it took a long time. Like most people might think, oh, she moved out. I literally just left that apartment last December. I lived there for 15 years. I couldn't bring myself to move out because I thought I was leaving him. So I
Oh,
couldn't do
okay.
it. But finally, it just didn't feel the same. I felt really, really sad and depressed there all the time. And I was like, it's just time to go. And once I left, I feel like my life just completely changed for the better. Like all these blessings started happening. Like I want everything bright. Like as you can see, my room is white. Like everything is white. I don't really like dark colors. Like from a apartment perspective, I still wear black clothes, but um, I don't like sadness. Um, I used to sing a lot at home. That was another like music has always been therapy for me, but I haven't done that like I used to since I moved here because it's a different environment, you know. Um, but yeah, I just try to talk about it. Like the therapy was helping a little bit, but then as I told you, it went left because she wasn't focused on what I needed her to be focused on. She was focused on my current relationship. And that's not why I sought
Right.
out therapy, you know? But I mean, there were some very strong lessons that she taught me as far as like thinking about different things in my life and the grief process. And that was, she's like, you never sat in it. You never allowed yourself to be like to go through the grief. You
Oh.
just always try to put something like in its place instead of sitting in it, going through it, and then you will come out better.
Mm.
And I think again that goes back to people of color, us being taught early on that you can't say that you're depressed or you can't say that like what's wrong with you? You better get it together and not
Mhm.
realizing that we have no control. That our mental state it's a chemical imbalance. It's
Yeah.
hormones. It's a number of things. And my depression and anxiety even has a extra leg to it, and that is I suffered so badly with fibroids that made my depression and anxiety go through the roof. I thought I was
Mhm.
gonna die. It was so bad. Um, but I um I, I didn't know what else to do. Like once I was told I would never have children. Oh,
Yeah.
that was another thing. It was like even though at that point I don't even think I really wanted them, but the fact when they said you have to have a hysterectomy meant you never having kids, honey.
Yeah.
Um, and I was depressed about that. But then it went away because I'm like, I have a dog and he's a lot. So I know I can't deal with no kids at 50. So, but it's just all of those mental things that our mind plays so many tricks on us. And if we don't learn how to cope with it, it's just going to exasperate and get worse and worse and worse.
So it seems like you tried to do some things to help you cope. Some worked, some didn't. What advice can you offer people that may be going through this depression right now, this sadness, this loneliness, because they just recently lost someone? Being that you've been down such traumatic paths, what can you share with them?
I would definitely say that they definitely need counseling. No
I
ifs, ands, or
agree.
buts. After I lost my husband, I went to like grief counseling. I did 2 sessions, and it was I guess I didn't understand the process, right?
Hmm.
And maybe that is something that, here I go with the business at, but maybe that's something that funeral directors can offer grieving families, like have some type of counseling advice, or things on hand for families when they going through that process, because once the funeral is over, we don't know what else to do. And it's easy for somebody to say, "Oh, you need to go through grief counseling." Well, what should I expect from grief counseling?
Right. And
So I
plus,
didn't.
where
Mhm.
do I go? Like you're
Right,
not thinking about that. So you do need somebody to help put that in your head, at least get the ball going. So you
exactly.
mentioned therapy. What else?
Um, Journaling. I think
Great.
journaling has been super, even outside of grief. Like whenever my husband and I would have a disagreement, because we were both alpha personalities, we both had to have the last word. You had like your word didn't mean nothing. So the only way that I could get him to really hear the message I'm trying to get to him is I had to write him a letter. And I would write the letter because you can't argue with a piece of paper. You have to sit there and you're going to digest it. You don't, like, I'm not standing there over you. You are just reading this letter at your pace. You may revisit a paragraph in the letter however many times, and now you got how you made me feel. Because that's super important too. People don't realize you can't tell me how you made me feel. You can't do it.
Yeah.
How I feel is how I feel. So journaling helps to get it out, like what I was feeling. The one other thing that from an advice perspective, that I would give people, especially if it's a romantic loss, right? Like a spouse or a significant other or anything like that. Just sit in it. Don't try to start a new relationship.
Go through the
Because,
process.
right, because sometimes you feel like you're you're talking about that person that you lost too much. Um, or like my sister-in-law would say to me, like with my past relationships after my husband died, she would be like, stop comparing men to him. Don't make those men like they gotta be him, because they're not him. And I'm like, I know, but it's just this is what I know. So if this is all I
So
know, I'm expecting everybody to be like he was, you
so
know?
lots and lots sounds like also lots and lots of self-care.
Oh, a lot. You definitely need
Um,
a lot.
it's which is can be
Meditation.
which can also be very hard when you're in that dark place. So I would think just like a lot of support
Hmm.
from others that care about you. Yeah. So
But the only thing I'm sorry, the
mhm,
only thing that I would definitely say in reference to what you just said about self care, family members also have to allow you that grief period. And it doesn't. This is gonna sound crazy. It doesn't necessarily mean a grief period because somebody died.
mhm,
It could be a grief period because of a breakup.
mhm,
You gotta
mhm, that's
let
still a
that person
loss. It's still a
sit
loss.
right. Like my mom got divorced, and I used to get so angry, like when she would compare her divorce to me losing my husband, until I realized that it's different, but it's still a loss because
Yeah,
your life is forever changed.
right,
So family they have to understand. Let me go through whatever emotions I need to go through at my pace. You can't
right,
grieve at everybody else's pace. You can't do it.
right.
So
All right. Well, we have almost a minute left, so I definitely want to thank you so much. I wish we had more time, um, but we don't. So, one last question before we wrap up. Well, actually, two really quickly. I wanted to know, how has Monique Healing Life changed anything about you? Monique's Healing Lounge, I'm sorry. And then also, how are you doing today? You have less than a minute.
Okay. The lounge has changed me because it's actually made me proud because it's normalizing mental health and it's giving people resources to actually get better. How I feel today at this moment, I feel pretty good today, and I hope that I continue to feel good tomorrow. But every day is, I just take one day at a time as it comes, and that's
Mhm.
all we can do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Trina. This was
You're
real.
welcome. You're
Um,
welcome.
and we will definitely touch base about the mental health in the workplace. Thank you
Okay.
so much. I
You're
appreciate you and your
welcome. Thank
time.
you. All
All
right.
right. Bye.
Bye.